Hello, everyone. Welcome to our March Book Sandwich In. We are happy to see everyone here today with spring hopefully around the corner. I'm Dina Viviani, just starting with some housekeeping announcements get my right sheet here. For safety purposes, if there is a need to evacuate the building, the door on my right, your left, is our closest exit. For anyone using a hearing aid, we invite you to take advantage of our induction loop system. It amplifies all sound coming through the microphone. And so that everyone can participate and hear, if we have time for Q&A at the end, please wait until this microphone is to you so everyone can hear. Please silence or turn off your cell phones now so as not to disrupt our speaker. And we'd like to thank the Friends of Brighton Memorial Library for sponsoring this program and our entire Book Sandwich In series. Our committee is reading to try to get ready for 26-27 season. And I also want to thank the Friends for a lot of our programs that are sponsored and listed in our March program brochure. You can grab one at the table at the back. We've got some health programs, we've got music programs, we've got Irish dancing, we've got cookbook club and some other book clubs, so please grab one on your way out. And all of our copies of Careless People are checked out, so if anyone hasn't read it and would like to, please stop at the info desk on your way out and they can place a hold for you. All right, and I didn't prepare anything. I realized I was like, oh man, like I know Gary. Does everyone else know Gary? Gary Craig, we are happy to have him here again to do a book review. He is now a retired D&C reporter, but I learned he is teaching a class this semester at RIT on some journalism, so he is still out and about. And for anyone who uses Substack, he's practically not retired by the amount of investigative journalism that he continues to write about there online, so you can check that out. He lives in Brighton, he has his lovely wife, 2 lovely daughters, and he enjoys traveling and working at Starbucks at 12 Corners. And with that, I'll pass the mic over to Gary. Thank you.
Thanks, Dina. Can everybody, thanks. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm making sure I got this thing. Dina said, do folks know what the book is about to start, Careless People? Okay. So I decided to, try to promote that I was going to be here and, maybe get some folks out. So guess where I went to do my promotion? I'm going to mess up. I'm going to ask people to talk about the mic for a minute, Dina. So my apologies.
They can shout out.
So guess where I went to promote this? Bingo. So, and it's like, and it sort of sums up how social media, and this is going to largely focus on Facebook, but I'm going to get into some others, has become so kind of part of our lives now, for better, for worse, and you can argue both, and this book will argue worse. And it's sort of this kind of ubiquity of social media, Facebook, et cetera. Like that was the first place I thought. I was like, okay, I want to say, hey, I'm going to be talking at Brighton tomorrow. Where can I reach people? I go to Facebook and, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, there's all those others. But you'd think the last 10, 15, 20 years, how sort of ever present it's become in kind of our lives. And it's interesting too, because actually Dina mentioned our daughters, they're near 40 and one near 40, one mid 30s. It's funny, they actually don't really use Facebook. They sort of purged it from their lives years ago. So I'm not sure how much of it is sort of generational. I'm really curious. So, but in your use of Facebook, how many have things popped up, the term memes, that might be political? See, okay, pretty much everybody, pretty much. So how many of those are oftentimes something that is perhaps about a political person that you're opposed to, and it's kind of something that annoys you or angers you that individual has done? How often do you see that on your feed, so to speak? Okay, a couple of you. Yeah. So in any sense of why those come up when they do? Bingo. So when I say algorithms, that's what we're talking about. So the algorithm with Facebook and other social media is basically, I'm on YouTube watching basketball clips because I love basketball. I'll watch some comedy, comics I like. So whenever I open up YouTube, there's 20 basketball clips and all the comics I want to see. The algorithms are like that, and they're both controversy and just engagement in general. They want you to engage, and if they get you angry, you're likely to engage. You're likely to Forward this meme to your friends. You're perhaps likely to do it without checking the veracity of it. That often happens. Whatever your politics, I can probably go on Facebook right now and find, if I did 3 hours, find a number of memes on both sides of the aisle that if you do 2 deep dives, you'll find out are incorrect or untrue. But if you're the person in that thread saying, by the way, this is untrue, you're the one of 100 that's saying that. Everybody else is out there feeding it to their thread. They're feeding it, throwing it into their feed. And their buddies are seeing it. They're recycling, et cetera. All the people who have similar political thoughts. And that's basically feeding the beast that they want to create, because that's their algorithms, keeps you engaged, keeps your friends engaged, keeps your family engaged. Even those who are perhaps opposed to you get engaged, because they might sound off and say, and call you names, because that's what we apparently like to do these days. And that becomes the monster that drives this. And what's fascinating with this book is you see, sadly, the mentality of the people behind it. And you would wish that there were pure goals and motives for something that is this ever present and this powerful in many, many ways. But it's depressing when you read this. Careless people. Anybody know where that term comes from? The title, Careless People? Anybody? Bingo. Great Gatsby. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the exact. Yep, that's it exactly. The exact quote, which I have here somewhere at the front of the book. Yes. Everybody's familiar with Great Gatsby, right? Yeah. So they were careless people, Tom and Daisy. They smashed up things and creatures and then retreated back into their money or their vast carelessness or whatever it was that kept them together and let other people clean up the mess they had made. Sadly, sounds all too familiar these days. But so that, and it's a perfect title for this book. It's a perfect sort of analogy, literary analogy, because this is a woman who worked Sarah Wynn-Williams, who wrote the book, worked for years in Facebook, and worked closely with Zuckerberg, the CEO, worked closely with others who were in the upper levels. She basically carved out a job that didn't exist. She really wanted to work for Facebook. I admit, I'll be honest here, there's sometimes I think she's I believe a lot of the book. There's some parts I'm a little questionable, to be honest, because I think some of it's a little hard to grasp. But I do think this part where she saw this opportunity with Facebook, and she's from New Zealand. She wanted to create something that sort of took it internationally. And what's fascinating is Facebook, which already was starting to grow at this time internationally, saw no need for anybody. They didn't. They believed that they could just go into whatever country they wanted to, or aspire to, and basically, regardless of regulations there, regardless of the government there, do whatever they wanted. They never imagined that they might get pushback from countries. And when you see they get pushback from, understandably, from countries on really all sides of the political spectrum, they get pushback from authoritarian, repressive countries because they're worried about this connectivity, except when China decides they could use it for surveillance, and they get pushback from some of the liberal or European, more democratic countries that are worried about what could happen to kids and families, et cetera, if there's no holds barred on what happens here. But so at the end of the day, really the people running these things are pretty much like the people that want to sell you Cocoa Puffs. Is that still a thing, Cocoa Puffs? Okay, thank you. Because that's what it is. I mean, they're market driven. They want to basically keep their stock price up. They want to make sure they're able to show advertisers, et cetera, how many people are engaging. And and what she talks about, it just let me back up one second. There's one part of the book I want to touch on. And as folks know me, I have a bad habit of going off into tangents, but I eventually get back to the spot. My students will tell you that. Imagine, so we talked about algorithms. We talked about the political algorithm and sort of the fact that these memes, as they're called, pop up on your feed, and they're sort of hoping to get you angry or hoping to get you perhaps sympathetic to something or whatever. Now, take that same thought and imagine if you're a teenager with suicidal ideations and you're looking to Facebook for whatever reason, and you click on something that talks about suicide. So imagine, you would hope that the algorithm would do the right thing, that the algorithm would somehow, sort of purge us, like, let's not give this person something to grasp onto at their darkest time. But, and this has been shown to be not just her claiming this, as she talks about this in the book. Facebook was just the opposite. The algorithm doesn't, you've clicked on this and that's now your algorithm. your algorithm is I'm interested in suicide. And so what starts coming up on your feed are things about suicide, things that even drive you deeper and deeper into this abyss. And that sort of shows you, I mean, and the fact that people didn't even think about this, much less even when approached with it, seem to defend it, sort of tells you kind of what you're dealing with. You're not in all circumstances. I don't want to sort of say that everybody was sort of like this at Facebook. And just today or yesterday, I was reading, I think Instagram perhaps has now created something for when a teenager or a young person starts looking up, topics like suicide. And I'm not really sure, I have to admit, the logistics of how this works. I want to find out more. It's able to alert parents or family this is happening. So that's good, but it's taken us like a decade to get there. I mean, it just seems like when this, and it was brought up at Congress, et cetera, you would hope that somehow, as fast as they can move on things that help the stockholders, you wish they would move as quickly on things like this. And she talks about this as well as many other things throughout. And so as I said, Mark Zuckerberg, everybody knows Mark Zuckerberg when I talk about him, the fellow who created it. Genius, no question. But you talk about somebody who, sort of runs fast and breaks things. And again, it kind of, as I'm reading this book, it just, there's these analogies with other folks I'm thinking of who, whatever drives them, whether it's notoriety or desire for money or desire for fame, which is interesting with Zuckerberg, because Zuckerberg in the book starts off very different. When she first meets him and she finally carves out this position, she gets him to realize, hey, you're going all over the world and countries are pushing back. You need somebody there to negotiate. And her idea is that she can negotiate for good things in these countries and try to make positive outcomes. Zuckerberg at first doesn't want to meet with prime ministers or anything. That's just not what he does. He's a coder. He just wants to be with all the people that are creating the codes. He don't send me to those meetings where I have to sit down next to a prime minister of a country that I know nothing about and talk. But as the years go on and he gets wealthier and wealthier and the company grows and grows, and it truly is now a company that its monetary value is more than some small countries. This personality kind of changes, where at some point he's palling around with the Obamas. He's speaking engagements. He wants to make sure he's like one of the top billed, no matter who else is there in whatever world they live in. And so you could tell how this whole sort of personality of his changes. He's still as sort of awkward as he was, when he was the guy that was coding. But his desire to sort of be seen in these circles is to be seen as somebody who's sort of shaping the world around us, just grows and grows and grows as Facebook does. And to a degree, you can understand, because it was shaping the world in many, many ways. But it sort of got me thinking of other folks, Elon Musk, for example. I mean, you can draw this sort of straight line with the social media there. And you have a fellow who, there's a number of things that he's done in his life which you can praise, and the work he's been doing. And at the same time, you look at Doge and you talk about sort of moving fast and breaking things. We're just going to sever huge parts of the federal government and worry later if we need them. We'll just destroy, and then if we have to build some back, we'll just worry about it later. And it's this sort of mentality, I think, that they believe they can do no wrong. It's different. Jeff Bezos, but is another one. And this, personally for me, as somebody who spent 45 plus years in the media, and as Dina said, I'm still kind of am. And with Amazon, obviously, a billionaire, and so he buys the Washington Post, and why, unless you're going to do something good with it? You've got enough money that you don't need it. So unless you're going to do what he said in the initial hours that he's going to do, which is build it into this already, it was one of the best papers in the world. He's even going to improve upon that. And as you all probably know, he just decimated it, a month or so ago, just destroyed the staffing and everything. It's like, why do you even go down this road where you have an opportunity to build something better and serve the community? And then you come to this point. And one weird analogy, then I'll get back to the book, not necessarily analogy, but reading this book and reading some stuff on Jeffrey Epstein lately. Good Lord, what world. And Musk and Zuckerberg and Epstein all shared this one thing, is that it's really weird. They really wanted to spread their seed widely. They believe that the more kids they make, they believe they're this superior breed of person. And it's sort of this kind of reverse eugenics. You're not, the brewer eugenics where you're getting rid of people, but it's the belief that, hey, if I have 25 children. They're all going to be just as smart as I am, and the world's going to be a better place. Epstein, I just wrote about Zorro Ranch and Weird Rochester Connection, which is out in New Mexico. That was his place where he wanted to impregnate a lot of women and have a lot of children. It's just a weird, it sort of gives you a sense of the mentality that there's not just careless people, but people that sort of think they're sort of above and beyond the rest of us in so many ways. So I'm sort of going to jump a bit ahead here. Then actually first, let me do one thing. Before this book came out, I corresponded this week with, just briefly, with the editor of the book, Mike Harpley, and read something he'd written about it. And to show you how powerful Facebook is, the links they went to make sure nobody knew this book was going to be published was something else. They really, really worried that Facebook would find a way to just crush it. And in some ways, they've kind of crushed her to a degree, but not the book. I'll just find this one part here for you, what all they did. So a very small team worked on the book. We communicated, this is the editor, he's in the UK, on encrypted channels, and whenever it was discussed, those not involved had to leave the room. So if you knew nothing about this book and you're in whatever book they're talking about, you had to leave. I'm sure you're wondering why. There was a rumor in our office that it might be Taylor Swift's memoir. That's how secretive this was. Sarah didn't tell, the author didn't tell her mother until it was written, before the news was made public. And he notes that, so this even extended over to retailers because, from my brief book experience I have, retailers get notified, months and months and months in advance of something coming. And, if they like it, they'll do some promotion. And he notes, usually we announce our books to retailers many months in advance. This is so they can build pre-orders and sort the logistics of getting the bookshops in good times. And they deal with thousands of new titles a week. So they're expecting the publishers to be cooperative and give them heads up and everything. So with careless people, the months rolled by, and yet we kept delaying our announcement, conscious of potential attempts to quash it. Our incredible sales teams managed to convince retailers, including a number of supermarkets, this is really wild that they were able to do this, to stock the book without even telling them what it was. I mean, probably if you're, HarperCollins? Yeah. I'm sorry. No, Flatiron. But whomever, if you're a publisher they know, then, maybe you can pull that off. It was so they were able to keep it secret up till like a week before publication. The stores had ordered and everything, they'd pre-ordered, and they did it without any knowledge of what they're going to get, and it ultimately turned out right. So she goes on a bit of a publicity tour, which lasts very short because Facebook goes to the UK and gets an arbitrator hearing there and is successful in basically saying that she had signed a NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, which oftentimes can limit what you can say and what you can do. Well, the NDA didn't preclude her from writing a book, but it precluded her from, if she were here, she would not be saying this stuff. Because every time she says something that's negative about Facebook, she gets hit with a $50,000 fine. And if her daughter is at the house and she says something over dinner, the mom does, and then the daughter says, "Oh, you wouldn't believe what my mom said about Facebook," she could get hit with a $50,000 fine for what she said in the confines of her house. So she cannot promote this book right now. It can be published. It is being published. And I think the reason this was online this week, I was reading about it, was I think we're within a week or two of the paperback issue if it hasn't come out already. So she was shut down within 24 to 48 hours of publicity tour. The Brits decide, and they're a little more stringent sometimes than UK with stuff of libel, et cetera, but this is not that. But they did decide that, that anytime she spoke ill of Facebook, it was in violation of the NDA. So she has to be, I'm sure she's made some money on the book, but she has to be incredibly cautious of what she does, because this is going to be a huge monetary penalty for her. So she doesn't even go around promoting it. The flip side of it is Facebook raised such a ruckus that it really amped up the sales of the book. So, even if you didn't know about it, thanks to Facebook, you knew about it. And it really, they sold a couple 100,000 copies within a very short amount of time, I think. And, she ended up testifying before Congress about, much of what she alleged. And we'll get into some more of that. Keep an eye on time here, because I know I can ramble. And Facebook's defense was oftentimes, well, a lot of this has been reported before. This is inaccurate. Just, oh, others have said this here, there, and yonder. It's like, well, is that really a defense? It's just, they didn't really come out, and there are parts of it they sort of pushed back on, but a lot of it they really did not really challenge at all. So now we're to the point where publication, et cetera. So a lot of this book is her experience, both personal. This is a young woman who, the book with her in New Zealand, she was attacked by a shark and almost died. I mean, her insides were like destroyed, and she basically, with sepsis, her family thought she was all right. The doctor sewed her up, thought she was fine, and she almost dies during the night one night. And they thankfully get her to a hospital because everybody's like, you're okay, don't worry about it. Yeah. And she ends up through this book is with a couple other like near-death experiences. She has some very difficult pregnancies, one of which, again, if you believe her, and I don't think there's any reason to doubt this because I think she's got the records that would show it, texts, et cetera. She's just given birth. She's actually incredibly ill herself in the aftermath, and work doesn't care. Facebook has jobs for her, and she's getting texts, she's getting calls, and she's trying to explain, look, I'm not in the best health right now. Nobody cares. Just keep on. And she keeps pushing through and doing it. And it's sort of the environment that I think the workplace environment there is, as you can imagine. So I'm going to sort of jump to kind of where this book leads to, then sort of come back through it because I want to make sure I get to this point. So a lot of this book leads up to, a lot of it throughout, and I'll talk more specifics, is her travels to other countries which have issues with Facebook, and her trying to navigate their laws and their regulations, and her desire to make it something positive in that country, and what she's getting from her higher ups. And if you look back, there have been, social media is like everything else. It's like, good, bad, indifferent. You can use it for good, you can use it for bad, whatever. The internet's like that. You could argue radio, TV has been like that, just sort of how it manifests and how it's used. And if you go back to, I want to speak of Arab Spring, right? When Arab Spring was sort of the protests in a lot of Middle Eastern countries against authoritarian regimes, et cetera. A lot of that was done, that was probably, you could argue, one of Facebook's, highest moments, was done with connectivity through Facebook. People found out where the protests were. They found like minds, et cetera. And, and they created such a mass of people and protesters that they really made a mark. I mean, to a degree now, whatever your politics, the protests that are going on now, if you agree, disagree or not, a lot of that is organized via social media. I mean, there are channels that basically say, hey, we're at 12 Corners this weekend, or hey, we're downtown at the Federal Building. And a lot of that comes together much easier than if you're trying to call 100 people. I mean, there's, the connectivity that this breeds is just, it's a thing that you can't deny. Remembering your friends' birthdays, there's so much that's good about it. But as this book says, it depends on how it gets used. And so what happens in a lot of these countries is Zuckerberg and his kind of allies in the upper echelons of Facebook don't really care about the regulations. Even if the regulations are meant for good. There's Brazil, which is I have this habit of when I do something like this, I start diving into really deep holes. And now I'm like into Brazil and what it's doing with social media. That's what I was reading before I came. This is fascinating. And then I said, eventually I get back to what I'm talking about. But actually, this does connect because when Uber went into Brazil years ago, they got this real regulatory pushback. And Uber decided, we're going to fight this, but we're not going to fight it just on a normal level. We're going to create chaos. We're going to find ways to disrupt the transportation system because we have Uber here already, but we've managed to get it in and sort of without worrying about the regulations. So we're going to find ways to disrupt the system. Yeah, we're going to basically go out and spend lots of money. We're supporting the soccer teams of, I'm not sure if it's a Senate there, of basically political figures we need. So we're paying money to their kids. We're going to try to get them on board. They do all these things which you can say, maybe a little underhanded, and more than just a little, some of them. And so when Brazil starts pushing back on Facebook coming in and wants to meet regulations, Zuckerberg's like, well, let's just do what Uber did. It's like people are saying, well, that's maybe not the best model template of what to do, because it was, really was disruptive to the society. It caused some chaos. It's like, so what? They kind of got what they wanted in the end. And then basically, if you look now, this is what I learned from reading about Brazil and social media, and not even social media, but some of the other things. Uber has managed to like depress a lot of the wages for people that were, transportation providers, et cetera. It's barely a living wage now there. And there's a whole fight going on in Brazil right now with what to allow social media to do, Facebook. And so guess which company among social media companies now has the most lobbyists in Brazil? Bingo. Twice as many as Google. So it's not a ton, but they're there, spending lots of money, doing what American lobbyists do, trying to get people to vote in the way they want them to by giving them money. Maybe that's a little harsh, but nonetheless. And so this is what she sort of comes up against in a lot of countries. It's just, and she has this desire to kind of, and this is where I admit, a little skeptical about some of it, because she's a little too perfect occasionally in the book for somebody who keeps staying with Facebook. But she has, well, I've got these kids, I'm sick, I need to stay. And then she seems like she has the talent, so she could probably get employed elsewhere. But that's the one thing that's sort of kind of like, why haven't you left yet? But if she left, we wouldn't have this really good book. So there is that. Have to credit her for that. And so she's trying to carve out this kind of international diplomatic role. And what keeps happening is she keeps getting thwarted by the powers above. Their concern is, how do we get in there? What do we do? How much money do we spend if we have to do it? And rules be damned. Good outcomes be damned if it's something that we think something pure. And this sort of, as I was talking about, leads up to kind of near the end of the book, China, which is where Facebook really ended up, because of her, with a lot of questions about what it was doing in China, planned to do in China, and did do it. And so basically, the Chinese government is like, oh, and it's that's an expansive market. I mean, you can see why. Okay, we want to expand our market. We want to make more money. Wow, if we can get into China, that'll be great. But, the Chinese government might have some different thoughts. And they were perfectly willing, as long as Facebook shared every bit of data about every user in China. So it had information about everybody, and Zuckerberg's like, yeah, whatever, okay, and she's like, wait a minute, hold on, and some others were holding about this, and this actually became part of a Senate hearing, and so it's one thing she does, and this is where I know the one thing I really love about this book, the term she's got receipts. She's got them, because there's stuff here where they're text messages, their emails, their presentations of preparation about what they're going to say when they're grilled by Congress about what they're doing in China, and she's quoting it directly, and so she's basically got everything there. And so she talks about when it is a 2018 hearing, and Zuckerberg gets called up there, and then later, actually, she, after the publication of the book, gets called up to do some more. And he has this whole, they've worked internally for days to sort of prep him how not to say much of anything, how not to really commit to anything, or how to basically say, this is what he often says, well, we go into a lot of countries and we honor what the government wants there. Just basically, okay, we're dealing with an authoritarian regime and they want information on our customers, we'll give it to them. But he finds a way to kind of like say that in a way that Congress seemed somewhat accepting of it. I mean, he was so well prepared that kind of the undergirding of what he was saying just seemed to go by them. And you also have the fact that it's Congress. So, I mean, there's that. I mean, I don't know if you remember that years ago, the late Senator Ted Stevens of Alaska, who chaired the Commerce Committee, was holding a hearing about internet, and he described the internet as a series of tubes. So that's kind of what we're dealing with here sometimes. Trust me, I'm not technologically good. I can't tell you much about it. I know beyond that, at least, a little bit. There's not a lot of tubes connecting us all around the community, and we're communicating through them. But you would hope that when Congress is dealing with some of this stuff, that you'd have a few folks in there that are a little more expert in the knowledge and the technology, et cetera. But so he was able to basically, dupe might be, I think some solve through it, but not so much. And he gets this question from a senator from Nevada, and basically I'll just sort of paraphrase here. Said, you've made no secret of your desire to see Facebook available once again in China. Could you please reveal to the committee whether you're willing to agree to either of these requirements? And basically the requirement says a social media platform from China, in China, must agree to censor content and conversation in lines with what China wants to be censored. Second, businesses that collect data from Chinese vendors can only store that data in China with the government having access. And Zuckerberg, as she says, kind of blah, blah, blahs around the answer and finds a way to sort of navigate it that perhaps not being, well, she does say is dishonest about it, but that seems to somehow appease. And as she says, he lies. After the congressional hearings, Facebook's stock price rises. So clearly he did enough to get people to convince, oh, he knows what he's doing. And so now I kind of want to return social media in our country for a minute. Not that that's part of this, but hey, why not? I don't know if you've seen that our government, not the Chinese government, mind you, but our government has subpoenaed, but they're what are known as administrative subpoenas, which means that you don't have to go to a judge to get them signed. You basically make the case to yourself almost, It's like, oh, I'm handsome. Yes, I am. And so, sorry, I do that. So, and then you get the warrant and the subpoenas of Facebook, X, the former Twitter, all these are basically saying, we want to be able to see the records of anybody that's been critical of ICE and some other federal agencies. And now in a perfect world, whatever the politics, in a perfect world, if they're saying we want to see the everybody that's been critical of Donald Trump or J.D. Vance, whatever the politics, in a perfect world, you would think, okay, let's push back against this a little. The pushback has been limited. I mean, it's almost as if China were asking for it, and it's to me, it's particularly worrisome. Probably worrisome to all of you too, no more than, and that this willingness to kind of seek the information, which you would hope somebody would say, that's really perhaps problematic, and then B, to those from whom the information is being sought to sort of roll over and say, okay, why not? And we're seeing that a lot these days with a lot of rolling over and saying, why not? Is anybody, this story I did not, really, I'm getting off, I'm coming back, I promise. This story I had not followed much. I've seen the headlines a lot in recent weeks, and I've heard some of the coverage, but I had not followed much about this whole Defense Department Anthropic. To folks familiar with that? So it's it's this whole this company which builds it's an AI company, and it has defense applications, and some of them are being used in Iran right now. Well, the fight with Anthropic, which pushed back against some of what the federal government wanted to do, and what it pushed back against was we want a lot of surveillance capability of our own citizens, and the company said, we got a problem with that. And it also was, again, if you believe the stories, but obviously they're pretty well sourced, whatever. And also the company said, there's some of the stuff you're seeking that we're not really sure, it's quite there. It's really ready to do. Like, well, we think it is. Let's do it. And so this company pushes back for what we would argue were pure reasons, and then gets basically maligned and dragged through the mud by the government to a point that it could almost be debilitating to the business. You have national leaders basically out there likening them. These are anti-American companies. They won't work with us. Instead they're saying, hey, we don't think you should use our technology to surveil the general populace. We've got a problem with that. And from what I hear, they're back to the table now. I think there's some stories about today, but it's like, this sort of desire to this sort of the surveillance state, so to speak. And it's, some of it's natural. I've really gotten off track now, but I'll come back, I promise. Some of it's natural. The technology, you can't go anywhere without being somewhat surveilled now. But you would hope at least your communications, are somewhat private. To a degree. And now it seems this willingness on both business part, to give it up if asked, and the government's part to ask. And that's what you see here with these countries that are repressive and authoritarian, and Zuckerberg just doesn't care. If we can make inroads there, then it's worthwhile. Some of the other stuff the book really goes down navigates some interesting corner. Sheryl Sandberg Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, chief operating officer, yeah, for years, and and sort of believed for a while to be a feminist icon. Yeah, probably not so much after this. And she wrote a book, Lean In. Is that what, yeah, thank you. Which was really well received and all. And she makes the point here. It's very easy to talk about juggling life balance and children when you're able to fly them on the jet to where you're going. And she's telling these stories as if the general populace can relate to this. It's like, oh, I work so much. And she does. This is one part. There seemed to be something sort of personal in this book with that. It's like, okay, I try to take some of it with a grain of salt. And there's one story in particular where, well, there's many stories, but this one, they're traveling together, and it's the private jet. They have a nice private jet. You don't begrudge them that. They've got to get places fast sometimes. And Sheryl Sandberg has a bed in the back because they're often just traveling for a long time. And when you read the book, and I don't think there was any sexual implications here, but Sheryl Sandberg asks Sarah Wynn-Williams to come join her in the bed and take a nap, and she finds this odd. Probably. And then she also claims this happens with others, that Sheryl Sandberg invites others back. So being a reporter, I can't not read more about this, because it's like, okay, this is odd. I got to find out what really happened here. and it's just, and one person comes to the defense of Sheryl Sandberg, says, look, Sarah Wynn-Williams was terribly pregnant at the time. And Sheryl Sandberg saw this, was just like, look, you need to come lie down. This is a long, long flight. It doesn't explain why she asked others to, but again, if that's true, but there does seem to be something somewhat personal here. She tells a story that she says is a story of Sheryl Sandberg, where Sheryl Sandberg's book talks again a lot about how she juggles, tries to juggle this life with her children and all. And they're at Davos, which we recently had some stuff at Davos, and I think her kids have been able to come because, again, they've got the money, and they've got the nanny and wherever they travel, so it's not like the rest of us. And she's hoping to spend this time with her children, but she keeps taking these phone calls. And over dinner one time, she has to leave and take a phone call. This is Sheryl Sandberg telling this story to others at Davos. So remember, we got this thread. And ultimately, she says her children, she felt bad, and her daughter gave her a big hug and said, "Mommy, we're so proud of you. You're helping billions of people around the world. Thank you for this." So I don't know whether her telling of it is inaccurate or the story. I just have a hard time with that. As a father, I think our children love us and respect us, but I don't see them thanking us like that. But that's a whole different level. But so there's a lot about Sheryl Sandberg in the book, which is really, really fascinating. How are we doing time-wise? Okay, yeah. And she too sort of goes through this sort of, maybe this is the nature of the beast. When you start traveling in these circles and world leaders are starting to embrace you and you're getting rich and all, maybe it's the nature of the beast. Maybe you're going to ultimately I belong here, and I'm going to stay here, and I'm going to do everything, and I'm part of this, and I'm not going to let anything risk getting me out of this. And that's what you see with a lot of the folks, except the coders, the people who are doing the behind the scenes work. A lot of misogynistic nerds. There's a whole other kind of sexual harassment part of this, where she has one supervisor, I'm sure the women in the room, supervisor who is a little too handsy and a little too problematic with his words to her. And it's the HR story where, you probably got it wrong. She tries to complain. Some others sort of somewhat support her, not a lot. And, ultimately it goes nowhere. And when she leaves, that's part of the whole story. I don't know what this guy's doing now, but she makes no bones about naming him. That's for sure. She does not pause at all. And so there's this sort of kind of thread throughout of the way these people operate. Like I said, maybe it sometimes kind of gets a little too gossipy for my tastes, but it doesn't mean it's inaccurate. But when I went down one of my rabbit holes, trying to find out if Sheryl Sandberg was inviting people to get in bed with her, so not something you hear every day. which is really not the point of the book. So but just to be clear, but it was part of it. Was like, and maybe that's starting to sound perverse. Let me get, but it's like, is this real? I mean, all the stuff that she has memos and texts about, I can believe. But is this person saying, "Hey, come jump in bed with me and nap for the next 6 hours, whatever"? And I still can't tell you the truth to this day. So, and I'm probably going to give up right now because I don't think I'm ever going to find out. But not for lack of trying. But it took me down this sort of thread with an article, a Substack article. Find my Substack, Gary Craig Substack. I'm awful at promotion, but I'm getting better. Evan Dawson had me on one time for the book I wrote, 7 Million. I couldn't remember the title of it, and he will not let me live that down to this day. So, but nonetheless, and this was somebody writing, sort of taking this book to task. It was somebody who worked at Facebook, a woman who was in one of the units that she talks about. And she makes some good points. She says she's talking about our election. And as you may recall, the use of social media in elections, which is has become really questionable from all sides of the political aisle. There were those on the right who thought, that not everybody on the right, but but definitely some on the right who thought that Twitter and Facebook and others allowed COVID issues to be purged. Those who wanted to be skeptical of what COVID was and what it could do, whatever your thoughts, to sort of be purged from the social media dialogue. And that kind of gave rise to where we are, where I think to sort of like they're now like willing, like, okay, hate speech, whatever, we're wide open. We've been blasted by that. And I mean, to the point where when I say Grok, I don't know if folks, so Grok is kind of the X Autobot or whatever that answers your questions. Grok, you read something on Twitter X and you say, Grok, is this true? And Grok, basically does this diving through all the stuff and answers, Well, Grok also, if you put a photo, it says, hey, Grok, can you give me a naked sexual image of this person? We'll do it. And they've recently found this out like a month or two ago because people started doing it, like ex-girlfriends. Hey, and Musk was like, so, it's like, it's just a free world. And finally, the pushback has been such that, they're finally having to respond to it. But again, it's almost, that is the common theme. It's like, until you are at the point where their very livelihood and their very business is being threatened, a lot of the leadership does not care. Because it's just basically, what can we do? What can we build upon here? And it's sad too, because I think take Musk. I mean, some of his space stuff, et cetera. There seems to be some purity in some of what he wants to do. Same with Zuckerberg. He had this vision, I think, and I think Arab Spring, kind of, oh, this is great. Look what we can do. But he never really thought about how to navigate when you sort of seen the other dark side of it, and then he didn't really care. Back to where I was going before I got off on Sheryl Sandberg in beds. So I started going down. There was this column that came to sort of criticize this book. Talked about, said, Sarah Wynn-Williams can't really speak about our election unit because they did have fact checking, but now they've gotten rid of all their fact checkers because they don't want facts to be checked anymore. But she wasn't involved, so she can't really speak in depth about it. Most of the other criticism in this column was interesting because it was like, she says this happened in 2016. I was there. It was November of 2015. Okay. It doesn't really sort of pull the rug out from under much of what she says and what she alleges. But the response to this Substack column was interesting because there were people who clearly were in the know about things and, there may be some stuff here that's a little off base, but I think she got it right. And in particular, I found it was a tech writer. It was a tech writer from the UK who's been writing about social media growth, et cetera, for decades. Incredibly well informed, obviously, and very fair. Because I was going down the rabbit hole, I read some of this stuff, and just incredibly knowledgeable and incredibly fair. And he started talking about Sheryl Sandberg and the part, sort of he wanted to talk about her and his interactions with her and the many conferences they've been at. And he sort of came to the defense of Sarah Wynn-Williams. Look, as she got more prominent in these circles, it's like everything else be damned. This is my life now. I don't want anything to threaten it. And I'm not going to move. And he writes in this which to me is really a great summary of this book. He wrote in his Substack response to the person who sort of criticized Careless people, said, but really my point is that with great power comes great responsibility. It's not easy and it's not supposed to be. And you don't get credit because you took on a hard job that made you a billionaire and you found it was in fact really effing hard. You get credit for being responsible, from learning from mistakes and slowing down and breaking as few things as possible, which is not really the way careless people operate and not the track record overall of Facebook. I was like, wow, he just synopsized this really, really well. And he has these anecdotes because he sort of answers some of the, when people push him back about Sheryl Sandberg. I think I don't want to imply they shouldn't do good. But he tells this story of how she managed, and again, she was such a force to be reckoned with. People wanted to talk to her. So they had reached out to, not him, the reporter I'm speaking of, and said, hey, do you want to sit down and talk to Sheryl Sandberg when we're at this conference together? He's like, yeah, I mean, I write this stuff all the time. I'm often trying to get an interview. Sure, I'll do that. Well, apparently they had promised one-on-ones, or they indicated, maybe they didn't promise, they implied what's known as a one-on-one. I sit down with one person, I'm interviewing that person. And he gets to the room. Tony Blair is there, the former prime minister of the UK. There's like other leaders from around the world are there. There's other reporters. There's like a room of like, 20 people, and Sheryl Sandberg is like Oprah. And she's managed to manipulate this in a way where everybody thought they were getting a private half hour with Sheryl Sandberg. And you get there and it's like, and then it became what a great photo op. And she walked around the room like Oprah and talked to world leaders and all, and it became a great photo op, and without really saying much of anything. Let me 12:46. We only got like 10, 15 minutes left. Anybody want to talk about anything? Because I have a bad habit of continuing to ramble. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Dina's got the mic. Hold on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
First, I want to say that just if anybody's not reminded of the statement about that if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And I think that pretty much describes Facebook and Twitter and all the business models. But what I wanted to ask you, it was one of my criticisms of the book, that she's not prescriptive at all.
It's
and I think you have a
very true.
Mistake in this.
Yes.
I worked for the Democratic Chronicle for some years.
Yeah.
And certainly Facebook and Twitter and all these things have basically decimated those publications and really reduced their impact. But I wonder if you have a prescription for us.
Wow.
Woo. How the government or how the populace kind of fights back about this, because we've lost something.
We have, and I thank you for saying that, because that's really a very legitimate criticism of this book, and one I wish I'd said. Thank you for saying it. Is that it is not prescriptive. It says I lived this life. It was horrible. The people didn't think about what they were doing to the world around them, but it doesn't really, as you say, offer how do we improve upon this. She never really addresses that. Wow. No, don't worry. How much time do we have? Not because I'll have a lot to say, it's because I got to think what I'm going to say. But for one, also, you're right about, social media, and even before that, just eviscerated, newsrooms. I mean, it took the product, you got it for free. And we did that too. When we first went on the internet, we gave it away for free. The Wall Street Journal was the only one that made people pay, and they knew their folks would. And we gave it away for free for years. Then by the time we said, we're losing a lot of money, people were so accustomed to it being free that we got a lot of pushback. I mean, thankfully people are paying now because they're being charged not a lot for online. And even I was talking to class about this the other night. We were looking at, I'm going to get back to the question, I promise. I'm sort of trying to think of an answer as I talk. We were looking at some college. There's a lot of colleges that are now serving communities around them with their own publications. They're creating. Brockport has something called the Canal Side Chronicle that's covered Brockport, and this is happening all over the country, really. And there was one we were looking at in, was it Georgia? I can't remember, Kansas, and it had these really funny classified ads. And a lot of it was rural, and a lot of it was agriculture. And then there was like, need any job? Call handyman Brian. Like number, just Brian. That's it. Call Brian. It's like probably everybody knew Brian. But I told the class, you went back 20, 30 years in the DNC, there was 20 pages of classifieds. And that's tens of thousands of dollars every week, if not every day. Craigslist comes along, does it largely free. Millions out the door right there every year. And then you get to the social media advent and what, sort of taking the stories and posting them and, making them free, or we give them away for free. Prescription, that's a tough question. I don't think there's an easy answer. I don't know if there's a business-friendly answer. I would hope so. I mean, I come back to what this fellow said is, I mean, at least, and this is a big answer, and maybe it's not really legislative, regulatory answer, but at least be cognizant of the power you have is sort of the big picture answer. And be cognizant of the power you have and think about the consequences of your actions, which we do every day. I mean, we don't run the red light because, you know what happens if you run the red light. But then you take something of the scope of this, and you have to realize that when you start saying yes to China, it's not going to be used for good. I personally worry about their willingness to turn over data here. I mean, I would worry, regardless of the administration, I would worry about that. I think prescription one is, that to me is one thing. Be conscious of your customers and don't basically, as you said it perfectly, that's the product. And try to think of them as something more than the product that you can sell that can make more money for you. I mean, you put on the good face, by doing, oh, here's all your friends. Here's your memories. Here's your birthdays. But at the end of the day, you're a product. And if you can, again, big picture stuff, regulatory, that's, I don't know if I have answers. If I did, I can't give them to you right now because I have to think more. But, see, I have no prescriptive answer either. Mm-hmm. I think it's just like, it's so much in life, the old try to do good. And regardless of the reach you have, if it's within our narrow reach of day to day, try to do good. If your reach is much more expansive, your responsibility, as this fellow said, is much more expansive. And the difficulties you're going to have doing good are going to be much harder than, me making sure I don't run the red light. I mean, it's going to be a lot harder. It's going to be a lot to navigate. But I think the first thing you have to do is create a mentality within the upper echelons of the air, that is first and foremost a recognition of the good you can do and the harm you can do. Are you going to do harm? Probably, I don't know how you can really rein in something like this without there being some lapses, along the way. But instead of sort of amplifying them exponentially because of the product, and because that's what you want is the product to grow, sort of, okay, we screwed up here. I mean, I was a reporter. I corrected my mistakes through the years. Again, it's not like I'm going to give the records to an authoritarian regime, but I had to correct my mistakes, and I wanted to correct my mistakes. And if you can sort of build that mentality, which admittedly, it's interesting. Thanks for this. One thing I stumbled on again in my my wanderings around the internet, Mark Cuban, another billionaire, who's just, let me find something he put on Twitter today. It was really interesting. There's a question of whether he's right, but it was an interesting sort of premise. So, we had a lot of primaries across the country last night, Texas, et cetera. One of the really big ones was the Democratic primary with Jasmine Crockett in Tallarico in Texas, in which Tallarico won. And Mark Cuban put on Twitter today, apparently James Tallarico won with a huge turnout from young adults. Want to know why? Here's my guess. This may be optimistic, but let's hope. On social media, the algorithms give you more of what you consume. Tallarico's messages are positive to the point of being syrupy. Voters that committed to watching his social posts got more of not only his posts, but also other positive messages. Contrast that with historically negative messaging across past elections, and I think the contrast was striking and motivational for many, enough to draw record numbers to a primary. It may be too crazy to some, but the idea of my feed getting better the more I watch the videos is enough to get voters excited. I mean, that returns to the other issues, the algorithms. Can you be a successful social media model without algorithms that feeds people what they want? Maybe, maybe not. But there has to be something on that front where instead of where you're acknowledging the harm you could do with whether it's lies or whether it's feeding teenagers suicidal information. I think there has to be something where you have to acknowledge A, the problems of the algorithms, and then B, this is for people far smarter than I, figure out how you can both keep the business model going while not feeding stuff harmful to people that might just be, not even really looking for it, but they stumble across one or two things, they read it, and the next thing you know, it's their entire feed. Yeah. I don't know if I answered, but so, yeah. Yeah, well, thank you. Okay, I'll take that. Yeah. So,
more?
yeah, no, you're not.
I
I mean,
that's good. Or...
I think, it's like everything else, just, voices have to be heard, and tell them on Facebook. The issues that you see, I mean, I don't know how many people, whether it's, because Congress, is trying to keep tight oversight on these social media. They're getting a little less wary these days, but it's the sort of thing where I think what you can really do is just let your voice be heard, whether it's direct communication with these powers, whether it's direct communication with your congressional representatives, and say, hey, we're concerned about this. What are you doing? Demand answers, follow up. There's not, can we like take down Facebook? And would I want to take down Facebook? Probably not. Can we, even if I wanted to? Probably not. But I think it's like everything else. The more voices are heard, people can't ignore when enough voices are heard. I don't know if that's a good answer, but it's about all I can provide, I guess. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we can just delete Facebook.
There is that.
I mean,
Yeah.
I do that routinely every few years. I go off for several years.
Yeah.
And before I do, I tell the people that I actually communicate with, I'm going off of Facebook.
Yes.
But I'd like to stay in touch with you. And what happens is my relationships get deeper and better when people text or call or we meet for tea. And we're not just shooting silly little quick quips.
Yeah.
So I do think
Here's my cherry pie I ate. Yeah.
Maybe we don't need our community to feel so global. We could have actual community that is very real and present, and use other means of communication that are out there. I mean, there are other ways to communicate events that are happening other than Facebook, though it's easy and far-reaching. There are other means. So I think like sometimes getting a little more creative and a little less lazy in my case is helpful.
Can I pretend that was my answer? No, I think you're right. And I am somebody, admit, who, I post my news because I use it for promotion. I post my news stories on Facebook. I'm on there probably posting 3 or 4 times a day. And I don't know why. You really got me wondering. Thank you. And that's true. I mean, there is, and I sort of use it partly for promotion, I admit. Like X makes me crazy. And because it's just become such a hellhole of people calling each other names. And that's what we seem to like these days. And, but I'm still on it because there's still, I find my Carolina basketball feed, and I know whether Caleb Wilson's going to play against Duke on Saturday or not. But yeah, that's the way. There's probably other ways I can find that. I can subscribe to the Carolina, basically it's internal. Yeah. Well, there is that. Yeah. Yeah. That's the problem with Substack. And as somebody who charges people to read some of my Substack, I am part of the, Substack is growing crazy exponentially now. They got $100 million investment recently. And, but there's like so many of them that I want to read. It's like, I can't pay for like 50 Substacks a month, and there's so many. And it's sort of the fragmentation of the media, because a lot of Washington Post reporters are on Substack right now. And I don't know what the business model that the Times clearly is smarter, and they don't have Bezos running them, so maybe that's part of it. The Times has been scooping up people that got laid off from the Post. The Times, bought up the Athletic, which is a sports. Yeah, it's great. The Post laid off its Middle East Iran expert, and so she now works for the Times. With what happened last week, please come work for us. So I don't know how the Times. Again, it may just come down to Bezos saying, I don't want to spend this much money. It's just, and not that, it's a fraction of what he has, and his interest could keep it alive. Yeah.
Going back to your comment about getting off Facebook, that's what I want to do every day. The trouble is, it's not the personal things that I get off Facebook. It's going back to your promotion of this event or theater things, business things. A lot of these companies don't send out emails anymore.
It's so hard.
On Facebook.
Yeah. Like I just before I came, I'm a huge fan of the late John Prine. And it like broke my heart when he died. And it was COVID. And well, that was part of it. And there's this movie out, which is basically a tribute to John Prine at the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, like 2 years after his death. Brandy Carlisle, a bunch of amazing musicians. And it's kind of traveling the nation. And I, through my contacts with a little, said, please bring this movie. And they just, messaged me before I came here, and I said, I will promote it as far as I can. And they just messaged me the days I'm out of town, of course, that it's going to be here. It's like, I knew it was going to happen. When they said spring, I said, I know this is going to happen. 4 days, I'll be away. but same things. I'm going to go, probably between now and mid-April when it comes, going to promote it on Facebook multiple times because the reach is there. And I want to help. I mean, since I'm like partly feel responsible for them bringing the movie because I begged them to do it. I don't want them to have 2 nights of empty theater, And like, why do we listen to him?
It's not even just that like the reach is there. It's like there's nowhere else to put it.
That's like, central. That's
it's
central.
Yeah. And it's like, but what other even, there's barely any print. I mean, we run into that too at the library. Like we want to promote our stuff. So we send it to every print place possible and other online ones. And it's sometimes just disappears, So
I mean, the fragmentation and the decline of media staffing is one, and the fragmentation of media is another, where it's really hard, like, to know where to even go to look for things.
Right.
And, one thing this class that I'm co-teaching at RIT is doing is we're trying to create a publication, which would probably be online for an underserved city neighborhood, where like this semester, we're just building the model. And then the rest of them can figure out next semester goes, I'm really going to be retired. And then hopefully it'll get up and get going, and we'll see if it can be sustained and what the university does. And if the students are marvelous, really incredibly diverse, internationally, racially. It's really years, freshmen to seniors. But it's interesting. And I think most of us here probably grew up with print and love print, and I love print. But that's not really the future. It's not even the present to some degree. But I think like a print publication, like when we're trying to tell this neighborhood of, hey, here's if you want to find a grant to help you with citing, to have that in like one place instead of like going online. Remember, I'm not going to go online and look for this week, see where I can do, is just so much easier. And you got it at the house and you look at it. But it's just what, newspapers are up against. It's so darn costly. It's like, can we do this at the college to actually create a small print publication, at least occasionally, that would serve that purpose? We had 2 neighborhood leaders in from years ago. I know Jardine Johnson, who worked in the Johnson administration, was a neighborhood leader before, and Miriam Zinter. And they talked about how when they worked in the Northeast, they each both headed neighborhood associations. That was the most popular. They had like a little biweekly or monthly that, here's the dinners that the church is putting on, everything. And now that information is probably there, but knowing how to find it and where to go is so difficult. So.
It is 1:00. Did you have one?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's you. Did you have one? Yep, last comment.
Thanks.
Hi, Gary. One of the mindsets I've taken to social media is it's kind of like going to a liquor store. There's a lot of stuff in there that can make you feel good, but if you spend a lot of time with it, you're poisoning yourself.
That's a perfect analogy. You guys should have been up here. You guys are. So, I mean, you're much better.
Of a certain level of toxicity. And so I shut it off. I went from posting once a day on Facebook to posting maybe 4 times a month.
Yeah.
And I check it, but I don't wade in.
And you don't miss it probably, right?
Pointless debates.
Yeah, that's the part.
They're not. I tell my students at Fisher that Facebook is the place that they now go to check on their parents and grandparents.
Very true.
If you look at it as a bulletin board, and learn to push away from the console or keyboard and go on and live a life and seek out the things in the community that you value. Eventbrite will send you an email every week saying, this is what's going on in your town.
Yeah.
And many of those are free. So there are ways to live without a Facebook social media dependency, but you have to be active about saying there's toxicity here, and when I encounter it, I'm stepping away. I ditched X over a year ago because it was toxic.
It's so toxic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so bad.
And I think there are other ways to get your ideas across in a respectful manner, but not engage in a shouting match.
Yeah, but you're right. I think you said at the very beginning that it likes anger because that's what feeds it, and that's what so much of it is.
Thank you so much, Gary. Gary did write 2 books. One is called 7 Million. Both of our copies are checked out, but if you want one, ask at the info desk. His other book that he co-wrote with Deanne Quinn Miller. I actually went and pulled it. It's on the back, The Prison Guard's Daughter. If anyone is interested, they could check that one. And if it's gone, ask at the info desk. Thank